family meeting, we have just a bunch of random things to talk about. Um, Things that Krista has seen in social media this week and has forwarded to me, and articles that I've read and things like that. And so we are going to start out. Um, Gotta love them dagger kids. I'm telling you, kids will always tell you the truth and they don't care how you feel about it. I love it. We're going to start out looking at an article from the Wall Street Journal about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we'll follow that up with another post about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let's look at the first article. Krista, you ready? And hello, Anna from Georgia. Hey, Keita. Our first article is from the Wall Street Journal, and it looks at the death of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how many diversity, equity, and inclusion officers are actually let go from their positions. And so, what we have here is the rise and fall of the chief diversity officer. Now, while this article goes into different DEI officers' journeys and how they're seeing the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion dissipating, or the need for diversity officers dissipating in many Fortune 500 companies, the idea around like diversity not being as central as it was during 2020 with the conversation of George Floyd, many diversity officers have actually been let go. And while, I think some people in those companies are like, yes, this is gonna, stop a lot of the contention and the argument and the distrust around the conversation of diversity. I think it's really interesting that this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion and this office of diversity didn't really stick around that long. I mean, if you remember back in 2020, everybody had to have a DEI officer. If you did not have your university, Christian or secular, did not have a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, you were like some way back being. Like you were not up with the times. You didn't care about your people. Remember that? Like, do you even care if you don't have a diversity team? Are you really even concerned about the minority experience if you don't have a diversity team? You don't care about unity. These were things that were floating around in 2020. And here we are just a few years, like we're not even 5 years out. We're 3 years out, and this conversation about diversity is seeming to take a different tone. I actually think that that's because no matter what a culture, a secular culture tries to do to bring in a true unity or to encourage true diversity, you cannot, even when you force it, you cannot force someone's will to do something that they don't want to do, one, or to care about something that they don't want to care about, two. And we have to have a firm foundation. What is the foundation for unity? I can't just walk into a place, any place, and say, you are now going to be unified. I have this diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, and they're going to set the tone for unity, and everybody's going to follow this, and we're now going to be unified. And this is where I think the gospel actually has a much better hope for unity than what the culture ever will, because we have a foundation that's outside of ourselves that says this is what you stand on. These are the principles, these are the tenets, and it is regardless of who you are. I don't come up with it. They don't come up with it. It is something that is God breathed and God given. And so as I was perusing the whole DEI situation, and much of what the complaint was, it started to take the tone of, well, the unity conversation isn't that important anymore. Or people aren't seeing the value in the unity conversation anymore. Or maybe we need to create a DEI office where that person is actually over human resources too. There's so much confusion as to how to get to unity that people are now kind of like, well, what do we do? That didn't work. So now what do we do? And so I just wanted to offer encouragement for us that as believers, that we actually have a framework for unity. I don't have to go and create no special position for it. I don't have to go and think about how I can construct it out of my own accord. We have something that is truly unique. And it's unique because it's founded on Jesus and not just on the likes and whims of a culture. It is something that's solid and that can transcend culture, or has transcultural principles to it, because it's not made up by humans. Let me see what I am missing here. My workplace is still ramping theirs up. I keep getting more and more emails and I just don't want to see. Yeah, I would say, Jojo, wait a second. I think that this whole idea of race unity and gender inclusion, that I don't see the gender inclusion part fizzing away so quickly, but this idea that, we all got to kumbaya because we're trying to promote this idea of race unity. I don't know how long that's going to hold on. I don't know how long people are going to be willing to give up their seats at the table. That's part of this diversity, equity, and inclusion office when it comes to race unity, is that, white people need to give up their seats at the table for minorities. I'm not sure how many more people are going to be like, I'll volunteer to give up my seat. I think people are reflecting on a lot of this and saying, you know what, I gave up my seat and it didn't work. I gave up my seat and I'm still a white supremacist. Make it make sense. So yeah, I think that's very, very interesting. I have not heard of KBL Lee, Kim. And then Michelle says, it's so funny. People don't want God, but the underlying basic concepts are biblical, like bankruptcy being 7 years in unity. They just want to define terms. Man, I'm reading this book, The Universe Next Door by Sire, and it's so funny how people want certain pieces of different worldviews. So yes, I can see people wanting certain pieces of a theistic worldview, but then not wanting all the other pieces. Some people want pieces of naturalism, and we see that being played out in critical theory and things like that, or nihilism. And so it's very, very interesting to see the pieces that people want from Christianity, like justice. There's no foundation. What foundation do you have for justice outside of the historic Christian worldview? It's hard, but yeah. So I just thought that was interesting, that the whole DEI office is really, taking a hit right now, as many DEI officers are being let go. Now, the next thing that I want to show you is a guy who actually, and this is very, very sad. Krista, you want to go ahead and put that up? Thanks, Kim. I'll email you a story. DEI officer at a California college that allows students to question a CRT speaker's stance and didn't buy into other DEI divisiveness. Ooh, you just started. Uncle Jeff, I've been thinking about you and Auntie Linda. I've been praying for you guys. So, and Krista is, I'm not sure if this is actually a video, but if it is, go ahead and play it and then I'll talk about it.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No, I guess not. All right.
Since it's not playing, it may not actually be a video. I'm at home today. So Krista and I are not together.
And yeah, let's, Richard Bilkstow, his passion was always education. He loved teaching and mentoring, and especially kids who came from the most marginalized and underprivileged backgrounds. And he really felt that he could make a difference to a young person's life. And, not all of us get to live our dreams, but he actually got to live his dream of teaching. He was a lifelong educator. He was loved by his students and admired by his colleagues, his peers, and school board officials. And he was recognized as a leader in adult education here in the province of Ontario, where I live and where Richard Bilkstow lived. And that was his expertise, teaching young adults in the province. He retired in 2019, but he loved teaching so much that he worked as a supply principal at various adult learning centers. And he did this not because he needed the money, but he truly loved what he did. Always looking out for opportunities where he could improve himself professionally, because he loved what he did so much that he wanted to do his job better. And it's also very important to keep in mind here, Megan, that Richard was very much on the progressive left. He truly believed in things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. He was gay. And the first session begins April 19th, 2021. Goes up without incident. Nothing, as far as I'm aware, happened there. But it all began at the second training session on April 26th, where Kiki Ojo-Thompson, the CEO of Kojo Institute, and she's running the training session, she makes a claim that Canada is a bastion of white supremacy, and that Black Canadians, African Canadians in Canada experience racism that is far worse here in Canada than in the US.
All right, let me stand you by, because we have a little bit of that. We've got some sound bites and I'll play them where appropriate. But here's just a taste of that exact moment that you just referred to in soundbite 1.
The racism is we experience it far worse here than there. So I know that's going to be a hard one for people to wrap their head around, but that's the level of white supremacy. Like, Canada's a bastion of white supremacy and colonialism. And, like, they at least had a fighting posture against at least the monarchy. Here we celebrate the monarchy, the very heart and soul and origins of the colonial structure. Think about that, right? And all that it represents. We hold it dear still.
Keep going.
Now, Richard had, he had taught in an inner city high school in Buffalo, a school with a large African-American population. And he felt that this claim made by Kiki Ojo-Thompson needed to be challenged. And he felt that people of color were far more disadvantaged in the US than in Canada. And he put that view out in the DEI session. He says, look, Canada, we have a lot of problems.
Do you think you'd be happier as a boy?
We've got that too, just a bit. And this is pretty bold. I mean, this is bold, but really it's a guy kind of trying to defend his own country too, saying, I've been in America. It's way worse there. Like, it's not worse in Canada than it is in America, which, we could debate all day. Who cares? But the point is, this is his point of view, and he's trying to rehabilitate Canada to an extent with this Kiki. And here's a little bit of what he said in SOP 2.
I just want to make a comment about the Canada-U.S. thing, and I have a little bit of a challenge of it. I did my student teaching in the U.S. and have spent a lot of time in the U.S. And to say here, honestly, that Canada is not a more just society than the United States is, and we talked about facts and figures. I invite everyone here to do some research, and you look at yeah, absolutely. And look at things like education, and look how you think about a system we have in Ontario where every student is funded equally. You go to the United States, they're funded based on their tax base. We have a public education system where everyone is funded the same way. It's not like that in the United States. We have a healthcare system here where everyone has access to healthcare. It is not the same way in the United States. So to sit here and say, all honesty, we're talking about facts and figures, and to walk into the classroom tomorrow and say Canada's just as bad as the United States, I think we're doing an incredible disservice to our learners.
So it's a perspective from somebody who's lived in both countries that any normal, open-minded person running even a DEI session would say, oh, an interesting point. Let's talk about it. No, that's not how it went. I'll just cut to the next soundbite and then I'll give it back to you. Here's Kiki's response to what he said, and you'll hear Richard on the back end. Here's how she handled it.
So what's fascinating is, and this is why we're in this place that we're in,
is that you think, so we're here to talk about anti-Black racism, but you and your whiteness think that you can tell me what's really going on for Black people? Like, is that what you're doing? Because I think that's what you're doing, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to leave you space to tell me what you're doing right now.
Exactly. I just wanted to make the point. You were talking about the United States,
Okay.
and I just want to do a comparison. And as I said, you talked about facts and figures, and listening to the facts and figures. And I think if everyone here looks at the facts and figures and all kinds of studies, and you'll see we're a far more just society.
Okay.
So there's more to it. If you want me to play, I could fast forward to the next part, but if you want to comment on that, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe fast forward to it when I'll talk about this a little bit.
All right, yeah, go ahead and talk, and I'll find the next clip. Yeah.
Thanks. So this gentleman, who is identified in the clip as being not just a proponent of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I would venture to say maybe even I'm sympathetic to some of the critical social theories, committed suicide based on, it looks like, the response that he received and the belligerent response, I would say, that he received from a DEI trainer. And so
an invitation for the participants, the attendees in this session.
What we've heard so far is just a bit of the setup, a bit of, the DEI person has made the claim that Canada is way more racist and impacted most likely by issues of systemic racism than America is. This teacher's thought was that that's not true. I've actually done my student teaching in America and have, read their stats, and it's much more, insidious and a larger problem there than in Canada. And so the DEI officer then basically accuses him of white-splaining, or, using his whiteness to challenge her, who is a minority. And she's asking him, are you, now telling me as a Black woman, are you correcting me as a Black woman? To which he seems to back a little bit and it's like, no, I'm not trying to correct you. But if we want to have a genuine conversation, an honest conversation, this is actually more, accurate. And it's a disservice when we don't treat racism as it truly shows up. Okay, Krista, we can go ahead with the next piece.
To put forth their views, one would have expected someone to actually challenge her a little bit on her claims, or at least come to Richard's defense. But no one came to his defense. There were 200 people at this session, and not a single person stood up for Richard Bilkstow. Fellow educators either remained silent or they piled on him. He was completely alone and isolated and made to feel incredibly humiliated.
Here's we have a little bit of that. She called it a teachable moment, dragged back up the earlier instance, and then got into what an example he is of essentially white supremacy. It's SOP 5.
One of the ways that white supremacy is upheld, protected, reproduced, upkept, defended is through resistance. And like I said, as I began to speak earlier, I'm so lucky. Who would have thought my luck would show up so well last week, that we got perfect evidence of a wonderful example of resistance that you all got to bear witness to. So we're going to talk about it because, it doesn't get better than this.
She's giggling. She's enjoying it. She loves
the tail end of it. It gets worse, and I'm not gonna play the whole video because it's long and you can actually go and find it, but it gets worse and it becomes just a berating session. And so Richard ends up committing suicide. He had dedicated his entire life basically to serving the underserved, the, culturally defined, marginalized, or oppressed groups. He himself identified as someone along the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And so this is where DEI can end up. Like when we play this all the way out, we have to ask the question of, I wonder how this is landing for the person next to me. You know, how do these constant accusations land? And yes, they are, you know, accusations that are largely thrown at white people, but there are also accusations that are thrown at minorities who refuse to play the game. So if you're not woke, you are refusing to play the game and you are a threat or a challenge. I tend to say challenge accepted, but not everyone says challenge accepted. Not it doesn't land for everyone the same way. And so this is why I think it's important for us to be asking, wow, I wonder how that landed. And I also think what a shame that nobody spoke up on his behalf. Like, didn't nobody know that he wasn't like a bigot? Nobody knew that he wasn't participating in his white supremacy, or were they afraid too? I actually have a DEI handbook. It's the diversity and inclusion handbook, and I actually don't have I can't show the front cover of it, but it says, and maybe I can put a link like in the comments or something when we're done, but it's on my Kindle. Most people don't even recognize that they are exercising prejudice over certain groups. Now, the most people, is referring to white people. Like, if we're just going to be clear, let's just have clarity. Most people don't even recognize that they are exercising prejudice over certain groups. The practice of condemning traits that are not homogeneous is gravely normalized. This is their words. So why did, you know, why was he berated and put on display when he actually, you know, believed all of their tenets? I would say that he is someone who actually would have been like, yes, we don't want to promote racism. Yes, we do, you know, uphold things like racism is ordinary, and storytelling is the way to help reduce the number of racist incidents, and systemic racism is, you know, everywhere, and things like that. But when we look at it, most people don't even realize that they are exercising prejudice over certain groups. The practice of condemning traits that are not homogeneous is gravely normalized. And I wonder how often they actually take this sentence into heart for themselves. How often are the thoughts that are not homogeneous with their practices gravely normalized? Gravely normalized. How often are people targeted because they don't have an idea or a thought process homogeneous with the woke concept? It goes on and says, unfortunately for us, that our society is not open-minded enough to accept diversity. Most people out there who do not conform to the prevailing standards of acceptance are treated with prejudice. This is what they're saying about minorities. Minorities are treated with prejudice when they do not conform to the prevailing standard of acceptance. But is that actually true? Because what we see is that this guy was treated with, what does it say? This guy was treated with prejudice because he did not conform to the prevailing standard of the anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or quote unquote, you know, woke ideals. I think it's important to ask the question of, what is DEI really promoting, and how is it even eating the people who actually are in its corner? Unless you are with this idea and ideology all the way, 100%, never disagreeing, you will be eaten alive. Let me see. He was using reasonable arguments to push back on what she said, and that's part of the system of whiteness. Plus, it didn't help that he was a white male. Yes, but there is no disagreeing, because there is no, not for some, it's going to be that you are either racist or you're anti-racist. And I would say that that would probably be her position as well. And that any pushback against the logical order of how society is, you know, walking itself out, or how racism is played in society, if you are not completely in agreement with that at every jot and tittle, you are being racist. And it further goes to show that if you are white, even just trying to ask a question is often seen as being confrontational and not allowed. This is culture, and culture is going to cult. And I'm constantly asking the question of how do we stand up against that? I think that in the culture, there are certain things that will constantly be at play that we'll always see and disagree with. But we don't always have to go along with all of it. And so I'm really sad to.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So, I guess I'm just thinking like, man, if I was a Christian teacher sitting in that training, like what do you think could have been done in that situation? As from a Christian point of view, like, do you see any moral obligation that, not to call out any Christians who are there. I'm just saying hypothetically to help train us to think ahead if we were to ever find ourselves in a situation like that. What do you think is the moral requirement or necessity of Christians in that situation?
Man, I think it's so hard because I'm not trying to bind anybody's conscience to something and say that I am the Holy Spirit and you need to be doing this.
Yeah.
One. But two, I think I would have said something. I would have been like, wait a minute. Now that is also giving the assumption that there might have been one other person who disagreed with him. If all 200 people in that training agreed with her, no one's going to stand up on his behalf.
Right.
Now,
I would like to believe out of 200 people, there was one thoughtful Christian in the room, but
and you would hope so. You would hope so, but I can't guarantee that.
Yeah.
Now, if there were, or if I can only say me, if I was in there, my hope is that I would have the wherewithal to be like, well, hold on, here's actually, some other ways to think about this. Or if nothing else, I know him and I know he's not a racist, you're out of pocket. So even if I can't necessarily speak to the larger conversation of the systemic racism issue, I might be able to speak to who this person is as an individual. Two, did anybody check in on him?
Like, yeah, I mean,
could y'all send an email? Could y'all send a text? Could y'all be like, hey, let me call up, oh boy, how are you? Like, that was rough. I'm with you. I'm in your corner. Let's go have coffee, and just check in on him. And then three, I would say, whether you agree or disagree with the stand that the woman was taking, berating someone in a meeting in front of other people, berating someone, period, is uncalled for, unprofessional, and unnecessary. And so can I come to his defense simply because you talking crazy? You are talking out of pocket. And instead of defending the ideas, can I defend the image bearer? Can I say, you know what? Like, hey, this didn't went a little too far.
Yeah.
And especially if you have more of a wherewithal about yourself to be like, you can say what you want to say about me, but look, we can tilly it up right here and right now if you want to. There were so many things I think that went off. But I also think that the cultural narrative says that if you are white, and I would say that there's a good percentage of Canadians who are white, and I would just assume that there would be a good percentage of people in this, Zoom encounter or Zoom training that were probably white. The cultural, communication is that you can't speak into this.
But I think that's where courage. I think that's where courage is required. I guess that's what I'm wondering about is, if a thoughtful Christian in the room, like let's say that there was a CFBU follower in the room, I would want them to know is it's okay to be courageous in this situation. And, even if I'm hoping that we're discipling people to be strong and to recognize when this kind of injustice happens. And
regardless of skin color.
Exactly. Yeah. And regardless of fact of whether he was gay. I mean, to me, it was just to act like that toward another human being is just, that's not cool. And so,
but I also think too, that people are also concerned about like him being let go, or him receiving some kind of reprimand, what will that do to me? Like, am I going to be reprimanded if I speak out or if I speak up? Am I going to potentially lose my job? Am I going to have to now figure out how I'm going to feed my family and put dinner on the table and make my mortgage and all of that? And at some point, we're going to have to say, this might be where I die. Like, this might be the end of my road here. But at the end of the day, like, we have to consider, like, how do I stand up for the image bearer? I don't support his ideas. I don't support, his lifestyle and things like that, but he is an image bearer created in the image of God. But I do think that for many people, it's like, I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I don't want to lose my house. I don't want to lose my car, and I got to feed my kids.
But where's that line for the Christian in saying, like, this guy got mowed down? Like, there's another clip where the trainer even calls the guy a weed, that he just needs to be mowed down, uprooted, whatever. Like, this is some dehumanizing way of speaking. And at what point do we as Christians have some kind of a obligation to not only speak up, but be in the risk that, yeah, I might get reprimanded. And that might lead to consequences, but my trust and hope is in the Lord and in his provision. And it doesn't matter what race I am. If I see somebody being mowed down in an unjust way, like, I'm just trying to think ahead, like, and kind of play it all the way out, that if there was a CFBU family member in the room, how would we think about that? And because Kim Vick is saying, he was abandoned by the bureaucracy of the school system. He was fired. If there were 200 people in the room and nobody reached out to him, and he felt just so completely humiliated to the point of suicide, like, man, I just have so many questions. And Kevin saying people have to speak up and stop being afraid of being called racist. Maybe that's the bottom line of what I'm saying.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. I guess for me, what I don't want to do is come up behind people and be like, you didn't. You know what I mean? But do I think that people should? Yes.
Absolutely. I'm not in any way trying to shame those people. I'm just trying to use it as, like, hey, in the future, like, sometimes it helps me to look forward, like, okay, what would I do in that situation?
Yeah.
To try it on as a thought. So,
and I also think that, one of the things that, and I'll use this as an example, one of the things that I've seen since 2020 is more of a boldness from people to speak out against these things. So I remember, for example, in 2020, we started CFBU, and on our platform, people would come on and say all kind of crazy things about, we're just this, that, and the third because we don't support CRT, and I'm this, that. And slowly over time, y'all, the family, be like, don't come on here with that. Actually, you're not reading your word right. Actually this, actually that. And one of the things that I remember praying for our followers and the family for was more courage and boldness to move away from this idea that I can't speak because I'm white, which was such a huge message in 2020 and, even still today. But in 2020, that message was everywhere. You don't get to have an opinion on this. You don't get to tell us about that. You da 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 da. And what I've seen today is y'all shoot back. And I'll be like, yes, honey, let the clap back be there. But I think that people grow in boldness. I think that it has to be modeled for them. I think that they have to see, like, oh, and also be affirmed, like, oh, I don't have to stay silent. And if somebody comes for me, they're going to have my back. And this is what the body of Christ is, like, and why even CFBU was started in the first place. It was because if I can physically fight, like, I'll throw hands for my family. Why wouldn't I do the same thing for the body of Christ, who is my family? And I think as we think about it, we need to be standing strong together, and then also standing strong against what may be coming for our brothers and sisters. And at times, what will come against someone simply because they're an image bearer. I defend my family And then I can also look out into culture and when needed, if needed, and through prayer be like, no, okay, you know what? This is too far. Like we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna knock that down. Or we're not gonna participate this way. I'm not gonna allow someone to do this to you. But Krista, I think boldness needs to be modeled. Think boldness needs to be affirmed. That you don't have to sit in the corner and just twiddle your thumbs. You ain't got to go over there with the goldfish simply because you bear white skin or you don't think the way that the culture is telling you you need to think. Let's see. The only reason I don't speak up at times is because I don't know how to defend the Bible. I'm new, but just in defending what is wrong in general, I'm in on that. Come on now, Michelle. Come on.
Well, Kevin's got a good summary of what I was so inartfully trying to say is we want to encourage and empower people to speak up, never to shame people for not doing so. And that's Kevin should really be on here. That's much better. And I like Jessica's comment too. I think all of us need to pray about this and prepare for situations like this. If we're prepared, we're more likely to speak up. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm going for is just thinking ahead. So
Yeah.
all right.
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, carry on.
As you were. So yes, this has been a very sad situation and it continues to unfold and people are continuing to talk about it. Krista, you got this. Look at Kevin coming through. The reporter says experts say you're courting the far right. He pushes back, demanding to know the names of the experts, push back by rejecting their premises. I appreciate this conversation, as sad as the conversation is. Yes. Okay. So here's something that happened to me. So I was doing a training not too long ago, and there was a white man in the audience, and he challenged me, and he said, and actually there were a few, but this particular person was boldly aggressive. Like, and I don't want to say like. He wasn't belligerent. Okay. So I don't want it to be on the table like he just like cussed me out or things like, because y'all know, not even today. No. But he was very firm in his position that Black men are they feel like they are being hunted, that if he were to bring in X amount of Black people into a room, Black men into a room, he can guarantee that all of them will tell me like they've been followed in a store and that they feel like America's a racist nation, and that sometimes CRT can help to alleviate some of that. And so my method of biblical unity doesn't address the feeling that all Black men, and it was pretty largely encompassing that he could ask any Black man. And I was like, I can pull up at least 10 Black men in my phone right now who will tell you that they disagree with you. But I, at that point, had to model a way to disagree. And so it was like a carefully played tennis match, because I am not going to lie to you. I'm not going to sit there and be like, you know what, just for the sake of all this, sure, you're right. No, we're going to go back and forth. But there is a way to push back and not to, drag someone through the mud. I ask a lot of questions. Well, tell me more about that. Well, do you think that all feelings comport with reality? Sure, I can get that, you might bring in a bunch of people and they might feel like they've been, targeted or, whatever. And those feelings might be very real for them. Can you, point us to some evidence that lets you know, one, that they were targeted based on race, and that two, that, America is a systemically racist nation, or just asking more questions, letting them kind of guide the conversation to its natural end. Do they, in asking questions, can they see the tenets of critical race theory or critical theory that they're actually supporting? But pushback happens. And there are ways in which which this DEI officer didn't do at all, but there are ways that I can honor you in your thought process as you disagree with me. And I don't have to agree with you at all. And we can be very clear on that. And we can still walk away very respectfully. Gosh. And then there are times when I've had something occur where people will be like, here's just the truth and you need to know it. And usually with people I'm in relationship with, I will offer the same, well, let me offer you a little truth. But we can't be so afraid to either have pushback happen to us or to push back that we allow injustice to occur or that we lie to people. And I feel like a huge injustice was done to Richard. All right. Let me see. Krista has reminded us that registration for fall book clubs is now open. Yes, yes, yes. So you can check that out on our website or on our Facebook page. And then, gosh, I can't believe we're already at time. I had one more that I wanted to get to. Krista, do you have that last one? Maybe I can do it in the last few minutes. I'm trying to learn the art of asking good questions right now. Reading tactics.
I got it here. Let me pull it up.
Okay, thanks. Tactics by Greg Koukl is a helpful book. Now, you have to be careful with the wording of the questions and how you're placing the questions and who you're talking to. When Krista used tactics with me, it did not work. It infuriated me. I wasn't there for it. But as she learned what questions or how to frame questions that were more supportive or questions that would elicit more thoughtful responses from me, just the overall, question-based conversation was, I think, super helpful and really challenged me and got me to, rethink my worldview. But just going through like the Columbo style questions, just like, here are these 6 questions I ask you every day. It didn't work for me. It didn't work. Me and Chris, we should talk about that sometime.
We should talk about that sometime. A nuclearizing situation. Now Kevin jumping in.
Well, hey.
Hey.
What's up?
All right, you
Not much.
You want to do this? Have Kevin help you do this Instagram post.
I didn't even know you was coming on. Look at you just popping up. You know, if this was my house, I wouldn't open the door, right?
Krista sent me the check, so I jumped on. So, no, yeah, I enjoyed this. Yeah, I enjoyed this discussion. When I saw that article, what happened to that guy, I thought it was really, really messed up and really sad that not only did it happen to him, but then the people responsible for it had no remorse, right? It was as if the whole thing about white tears, like they just don't care. That's kind of how it was coming off. Like, this man committed suicide, and it was kind of like, we don't care about white tears.
That's the ultimate white tear.
And
go ahead.
No, I'm saying, like, his life didn't matter at all because he's white. It was almost like that was just the cost of justice. That was, if that happened to him, oh well, worse happened to our ancestors. It is just, the mindset of it is so racist and so evil, and it's held up as this virtue. Is held up as this symbol of justice, and this is the way we ought to be going and doing things. And it's really evil. It is really evil and dark, and nobody wants to call it out. Everybody's afraid to call it out because we see what happened to this gentleman, and he didn't even say anything bad.
Yeah.
All he did was call her out on her lie, because nobody believes that Canada has the same racial history as the United States.
Yep.
But she wants to make that claim because her paycheck depends on it.
Don't play no games.
The power that she has in front of that room depends on it, right? It is the power of guilt and shame. And that's what she was doing. And the fact that he would question that and challenge that, he was a threat. And she used the tools at her disposal to shame him to silence. And nobody else was willing to speak up, and they move on. They continue to do the work, and they just kind of step over this man's dead body and keep going.
Yep.
So, but that's my thoughts.
So Man, gosh, and this is gonna sound real bad, and I'm just gonna prepare y'all now. But when me and Krista first got into this, I was like, people gonna talk about you bad, and you better not cry. We will talk about this. We will debrief at home. You can cry all you want at home, but we not gonna go out there and no, because then I feel like then they got you. I feel like the thing that really made, I think he would have been better off if when she said, "Are you trying to use your whiteness to challenge me?" instead of backing back and being like, "Well, I'm just trying to," he should have been like, "Look," like he should have, I feel like, pushed a little bit more to show that you actually can. I wish that there would have been a wherewithal or a confidence, in him or in others to push back. But yeah, like we cannot allow this thing to devour us regardless of your skin color. Know that you are more than the whiteness that people want to accuse you of. And you can be accused of whiteness regardless of your skin color. But for my white brothers and sisters out there, no, you need somebody to lay hands. Call me and Kevin. Well, call me because Kevin got a family, and I got, I'm not trying to have to pay for his bill, but call us. Don't play no games.
Yeah, I think I think it hit him harder too because he's on the left, right? And those who are on the left that want to be that good person, that want to be that good ally, the problem is they buy into the premise itself, right? He's bought into the premise, and so he's like prefacing his statement, letting her know he's an ally before he pushes back on something. He's lost already.
Yep.
Because he's bought into the premise instead of just saying and challenging it from the start. And so once they have you in their hands and they know that you are sensitive to coming off as being racist, then they know they have you. And you don't have to be disrespectful. You can say, "Hey, with all due respect, I understand where you're coming from, but," and just come with but you don't have to preface it with, "I understand, the plight of Black people in America," and you don't have to do all that. Don't have to be that side.
God bless you, because you know what? Y'all should listen to Kevin's directions. You can preface it by saying, with all due respect, I am still a work in progress. Like, I was thinking about that this morning. I was like, if kindness is a fruit of the spirit, I am probably still a seedling, because come at me like that. Come at Krista like that. She ain't even gonna have to say nothing. And that's what's so sad, that there was nobody who said anything on his behalf.
Yep.
Nobody.
Yep.
Nobody. And I do agree with Krista. There probably was at least one thoughtful Christian in there. We can't be so afraid.
There are a lot of people in there that agree with him.
You said what?
I said, yeah, there are a lot of people in there that agree with him. They were just all afraid to say something. Even people who would consider themselves liberal and on the left have a major problem with this stuff. They're just afraid to challenge it. They're afraid to be called a racist. They're afraid to be on, quote unquote, the wrong side of history, right? And so, they stay silent.
Yeah,
they stay silent, but internally they agree with him. They just won't say anything. It reminds me of Brett Weinstein at what's the name of the school? That the documentary was made.
It's
Evergreen College.
Evergreen College. Evergreen.
Yeah. He said colleagues would reach out to him personally and let him know they agree with him, but publicly they wouldn't say anything because they didn't want to be the target of the mob.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how it works. And that's why you have to say something. Otherwise, you're allowing it to work. And so I think that's what we're saying is you have to speak up. You can't be afraid. Otherwise, they win.
Yeah. And I mean,
but I think it's also a trust issue of like, my hope is in the Lord. My trust is in the Lord. And that's where we're different than the world. Like, there's a lot of people that are atheists that are talking about being uncancelable and all of this. That's fine. But from the Christian perspective, we have to remember our hope is in the Lord. And so if standing up for someone in that kind of situation eventually leads to my termination, I have to understand at the end of the day that my trust is in the Lord. Now, you don't have to be like going to look for a fight, but sometimes a fight finds you, and then you better be ready.
You better have hope in the Lord and in these hands. I'm just saying. But I mean,
Hey,
it's true. Like,
just know.
I don't think that one, as Christians, we need to be going to look for a fight, like Krista said. And gosh, I don't know. I think some people will argue and say that, when we look in the Bible, do we have precedent for us, fighting against the culture or being so aggressive? Like, I probably am way more aggressive than what the Bible allow, but don't start, Kevin. But I think it is that unique balance of, understanding that we do trust in the Lord and that we can trust him, and also doing it biblically. I don't know. What were you gonna say, Kevin?
No, I'm just saying that, we know you based it from the equivalent of Nazareth. That can anything good come out of Nazareth? So we understand. You're
Won't he do it?
A little rough around the edges, like that.
You got that right. You got that right.
All right, do you want to do
No,
this?
but hey, somebody in the chat.
What'd you say, Kevin? What'd you say, Kevin?
I say somebody in the chat want to know what you're drinking.
Oh, it's an iced coffee. So I have, and then we are going to do the last segment.
Okay.
I started making my own coffee creamer. And so then today I made a cup of coffee. Now I drink my coffee black. Don't play no games. Just black and strong. But when I make iced coffee, I do like to have a little creamer in it. And so I made a cinnamon vanilla coffee creamer and I put it in my iced coffee. And this thing is blessed with a little almond milk. Won't he do it? I am here for it all day. Yes. Okay. Last segment. This is something that maybe somebody wrote in. Okay, it says, okay, so y'all mentioned unwritten. No, this isn't the one, Krista.
This is done from the Asian commenter.
This isn't the one. We're supposed to do the other one, the one
on poverty.
Oh, is this that? Okay, yeah. Sorry, we didn't spend too much time on the first one. Yes. Okay, so this is somebody who wrote in on Instagram, and it says, okay, so y'all mentioned unwritten practices in society that count as examples of institutional racism in one of the slides involved. Could societal and media practices on attractiveness and beauty count as an example of this? Our society typically, through norms related to mass media and entertainment, promote whites as the normative beauty standard to the exclusion of other races.
Okay, let me get the second slide. Just give me a second.
Okay. We also have a video. They wrote this into another ministry as well. And that ministry, I'm assuming it's a ministry, but they have a podcast and they address this question as well. So I do want to play just like the clip from that podcast to see how they answered it. But Kevin, I'm interested to know your thoughts about this as well. Because I have a couple thoughts. It says, as an Asian man, I can say that I've especially felt the consequences of this reality because I'm told a lot. And stats back me up on this, either implicitly or explicitly, that people don't find me as attractive as white men because I'm Asian. And that reality cannot reasonably be separated from societal media norms in America that uphold whites as the standard of beauty over non-whites. Could that count as an example of institutional racism? Krista, while you get the clip up, I'm gonna go ahead and have Kevin share his thoughts first. I think Kevin might have a small delay.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, go ahead.
So, all right. So I do think you can you can see how society and media plays a role in beauty standards. You really can. But at the end of the day, I think people just naturally know what's beautiful, or to them, right? I think people know what's attractive and what's not. I don't think his issue is that he's Asian. I think his issue is that women just don't think he's cute. I'm just gonna be honest.
You didn't just say that, did you?
I can't say, oh, people don't find me attractive because of social beauty standards. I just can't come off and say that, right? I mean, I go other places in the world as a Black man, and I'm top of the food chain, and that's not because of their cultural standards have pushed that. It's the opposite. You know, a Black man go to Europe, you know, their standards in their country aren't Black men are the most wonderful thing on earth. But for some reason, that tends to be. So I don't think it's necessarily, you can blame it all on cultural media standards. Because regardless of what the media puts out there, if you see somebody who catches your eye and you find attractive, you're going to find that person attractive, no matter what standards the world seems to point to. Because there are plenty of people in this world who don't meet that standard they're pointing at, and they get plenty of attention. A lot of them are married. Like, everybody doesn't meet that standard, but yet somehow people are getting together and finding others attractive, and so I get what they're saying, but I don't think we can blame someone not finding us attractive on social beauty standards. That's just me.
Okay. Well, that got deep quick. I was gonna say that.
Oh, sorry. Was I supposed to play something else?
No,
I didn't get the script.
Ain't no script. You say what you say. We okay? I was gonna say that gosh, a lot of times we want to, and when I say we, it's things like I hear in the media, or people who want to talk about like how things should, quote unquote, should be. And it's more like, we need to have more diversity in the media. We need to have more diversity in, you know, we take it to church. We need to have more diversity in our worship. We need to have more diversity, more diversity, more diversity. Tell me again the percentage of people that are represented by your group in America. And so when we think about, you know, the amount of Asian or Asian Americans that are in America, does it correlate with what we see in the media? So when we look on TV and movies and things like that, there's a lot of white people. Why? Because there's a lot of white people in America. And so I don't know that it's this intentional push that only things that are, you know, European in nature are what is, you know, setting the tone for beauty standards. I think there's a lot more people with straight hair, lighter skin than there are people who look like me. So just because I might wear my hair straight today, so then a whole nother question is, where does preference even get to have a play in this? Just because I might wear my hair straight today doesn't mean that I'm trying to participate or have been bought into some white Eurocentric standards of beauty. I might just enjoy having my hair straight today. Tomorrow you might see me in a nappy fro or in braids or in something like that. But we don't give grace or room for all of that. We immediately run to the idea of, you know, this idea that things are definitely systemic in nature, or it's the result of, you know, this bend in society. I think I also asked the question of like, who was telling you that they didn't want to date you because of your ethnicity? Like, and how did that question come up? Like, are you soliciting this answer? And if you are, and people are honest, well, I don't know what to say about that, because if you're asking for honesty, then you're going to, you know, at times get brutally honest answers. But what about preference? Where does that get to come in? Because I know men who prefer a certain type of woman, you know, and I know women who prefer certain types of men. And I don't know that that makes it that somebody has been bought into a certain, standard of beauty or, social ideas. It could just be their preference.
I'll give an example, Mo, because the example in society that has been set up as the beauty standard has been the supermodel, right? Black men have never bought into that as being the standard for beauty, because Black men always say they too skinny, right? We have our own preferences. So just because the magazines are putting this up as the standard doesn't mean that is automatically what everybody is seeking and going after.
Yeah. I think,
but I think
go ahead.
that there's also, we should acknowledge that the Western standard of beauty historically, like, there is a precedent for giving preference for that. And
Yeah.
I think that could be an example of an institutional issue more historically. But I think that and I think I could maybe say, like, prior to George Floyd, there was the rather odd situation that when I would go to Walmart with Monique, that all of the multicultural hair products were behind a locked case. It was very strange, and I never noticed it. And it was like all the hair care products for white people were out in the open. And so every time we went to the Walmart, at least here in our area, I don't know how it was nationally, but we had to ask permission so that Monique could buy some shampoo or some other hair care products. It was very strange. But then after George Floyd, all of a sudden, all of the products were out in the open. And I thought, this is interesting, and so could that be an example of a system of an institutional issue? Possibly. But I think that there is something to the idea of Western beauty ideals, historically speaking. But people do have preferences.
So when we talk, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, those products were locked up for the same reasons that they lock up the electronics. Those are the products that are being stolen. So, but I don't want to dismiss the whole premise that there are standards and there are effects to that. I was talking to a buddy that's from Africa, and he was talking about the effect on European beauty standards on African women. And we know in a lot of African communities, skin lighteners are a big thing. It's $1 billion industry now of skin lighteners, where these Somali and Ethiopian women are using these products to lighten their skin, right? That is definitely the effects of what we would say European beauty standards. So I don't want to completely dismiss that's a thing. I was just kind of pushing back on the idea that I don't think everyone holds up those ideals as a standard, right? A lot of times, especially with women, those standards are internal. They're not what men are looking for or all the time. Sometimes it's insecurity within the person because they don't meet what they view as the societal standards. All right. But in terms of, there's a such thing as pretty privilege, but I just don't think it's about race. I think you can have an attractive one. We see this in Hollywood all the time. There are attractive people across the spectrum, and they have privilege because they're attractive, not necessarily because of they fit a particular image or mold.
I agree. And I remember reading an article about like how humans tend to group people who are pretty, or how they classify people who are pretty. And it's like the symmetry of the face and your eye shape and where your eyes sit. And are your eyes sunken in or do they protrude? What does your nose look like? There's all of these different standards that humans kind of just seem to adopt. I don't know if we all our ancestors kind of just got together and was like, hey, this is going to be pretty, but there are certain standards that, I think we uphold is this is what is pretty. In regards to the historic precedent for beauty and the idea of, you need to look like the European or the white European way of looking. That has been a problem. I would say up until recently in some industries. Like a couple years ago, this news anchor sued her station to be able to wear her hair in the kinky way that it comes out of her scalp, so she doesn't either have to wear a wig or straighten it, but she could wear her natural hair. People should be allowed to wear their hair the way that it grows out of their scalp. I should not have to perm my hair, press my hair, or do any, I mean, as long as I'm presentable, why do I have to hide the way that God made me? And I still stand by the thought that, not everything is based on the societal ideas. Like not every person is not attracted to someone because they don't want this specific ethnic group. And it doesn't have to do anything with race, I guess is what I'm saying. Like there are people who simply aren't attracted to certain things. I am not attracted to short people. I like tall people.
Now, wait a minute.
Wait, hold on. Hold on. I'm not attracted to now. Does that mean I won't marry a short person? No, I wouldn't say that.
So you're
I'm
open to short
hold
people
on. I'm open
if
to
they're
that.
friends. All right.
And so I think part of what could be hit on in response to the person who wrote in is that, one, if people are like, well, you're this ethnicity, I don't want to date you, leave them people alone. No, those people ain't for you, no way. Bye.
Mhm.
Bye.
Yep.
Bye, girl, honeys, because God got somebody for me. But know that, some things are preference. It may not have to do anything with race or racism. It could, but based on, not knowing those people and not having evidence, I can't say that it is. And I'm cautious to say that these things are systemic in nature. But if you find yourself as being like, I'm not attracted to, short people like me, I'm not attracted to short people, but I never want to close the door and be like, well, just because they short, bye. You know what I mean? Like I'm 5'8" and a half. I wish I was 5'9". But if the Lord sent somebody along who was 5'6", and I knew that this is what the Lord was, blessing me with, I'm not gonna say no. So I think it's a issue, a matter of heart as well for people. Like you can be attracted to someone and you can have your preference, and that's fine. Just make sure that your heart is open to what the Lord might be doing that's different than what you think you need or want. Okay, let me go to the comments now that Krista has probably put me on Tinder and Coffee Meets Bagel and everything else. Yes, just like many other things that are locked up, like fake nails, lashes, etc., and they are not expensive, just the most stolen. Yeah, well, I don't know why y'all guys talk about the fake nails and the lashes. I see so many beauty.
Sometimes they go too far.
Oh yeah, you cannot be looking like you done stole baby spiders and attach them to your face. No. You can't. Now, and I do appreciate a nice lash.
But somebody finds that attractive. Somebody.
There is a guy for that person. I see so many beautiful non-European stars popular today, especially compared to 40 years ago. Julia, I completely agree. I think especially post George Floyd, I was watching a commercial yesterday and there were no white people in this commercial except for one. It was just one small white person, like way in the back. And I was like, man, it was like they was trying to hide the white person.
You watching BET?
No, it was not BET. It was like an AT&T commercial or some kind of cell phone commercial. And I was just like, wow, like it's so interesting to notice that every person in this commercial with a speaking role or some kind of, I'm going to look at the camera's going to swirl around me, that positioned person is a minority. There will always be societal standards of beauty of some kind or another. As believers, we have to reject most of them because we understand that true beauty goes much deeper than surface level pretty. I completely agree. And this is why I'm saying if people are like, I'm not going to date you because you're Asian, you got to tell them bye. Honey, you can chuck the deuce because you wasn't for me no way.
Yep. But whoever it is, I'm going to tell you, man, even if you Asian, walk in your swag, walk with confidence.
Don't play no games.
Yeah.
Don't play no games. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. You show up to the party as who God has made you to be. Don't play no games. People will see you. Let's see. If I left my hair the way it grows out, everyone would think I just jumped out of bed. I don't spend a lot of time, but that idea just goes right over my head. That's very funny. Yeah, no. I got to tie mine down at night and make sure that it's sealed up. Yes. Okay. If you know, shut up. Do you see the things that I go through in my daily life? Everyone, you guys can please just stretch a hand and pray for Krista and her mind. What were you gonna say, Kevin?
Oh, nothing.
You was gonna say
well,
something.
You didn't read the comment. You didn't. The people on the podcast won't know what you're talking about. You got to read the comment.
They don't need to know. It says, for the podcast listeners who we love and appreciate, if you know a nice tall man from Mo, have them email Kevin.
He'll provide the pre-screening.
Yes.
He will pre-screen. Don't play no games.
Fellas, just so you know that you got to exegete Romans 9. That is the test. So
all right. There it is, you guys. But yeah, I know, and oh my gosh. So here's a story because I gotta go. I was talking with someone about being single, and I mean, if you honest, sometimes you'll be wondering like, what happened? Like, when is it? Like, is it gonna be my turn? And my friend was like, "Well, let's Google your name and see what people are saying about you." And I was like, what? And Ismo, or it wasn't Ismo married, it was Chantal Monique's husband was the very first pop-up when we put in my name. And I was like,
people be Googling about you.
Why people talking about my husband? I don't know. Anyway, family, this has gone on a lot longer. This foolishness is just here. Let me see. Growing up, I never, ever thought I would marry a guy with blonde hair and blue eyes who is only an inch taller than me. But here I am. And my husband is the handsomest man in the world to me. That's awesome. God finna bring you a short man if you ain't careful. You know what? And I will, if that is how God is blessing me, I will receive it. I'm about to Google. Oh, y'all stop it. All right, you guys. With that, thank you so much. Oh, you know what? My idea for the next family meeting is ask me anything. What questions do you have for me? Today I told a story about my eye. Yeah. If you email info@centerforbiblicalunity.com, you can submit your questions and I will answer those on the next family meeting. So info at centerforbiblicalunity.com. You can email right from your phone, people, or, hop on the computer, whatever. Email your questions in and I will get through as many questions as possible on the next family meeting. And the only question I won't answer is how old I am. All right. So Kevin already submitted. You guys, I am so grateful for all of you. Thank you so much. Kevin, I'm grateful for you. Krista, I'm grateful for you. I'm so glad we're family. We will see you next time. Bye.